Everyone wants to know what's going to happen, and many people have tried different ways of predicting the future, from seeking divine intervention, using past trends to predict future trends, or the good old-fashioned gut feeling. No matter the method, there's a lot more predictions that people get wrong than they got right. Here are some of the most hilarious and inaccurate ones. You may be familiar with the detractors of online shopping from only a couple decades ago, but the failure of remote shopping was discussed in an essay published in 1966 by Time magazine. The idea was to predict what the future would be like in the year 2000. While they were correct that remote shopping would exist, they made a boldly sexist claim that it wouldn't take off because women will want to get out of the house. And everyone knows that the only way a woman is allowed to leave the house is if they're shopping. They say women be shopping. They further claimed that women will want to handle the merchandise and that women like to change their minds, so not physically being in the store could never work. Luckily, it turns out both men and women love online shopping, and we don't live in the sexist hellscape that was foretold by 1966's Time. We live in a totally different sexist hellscape. One of the most famous business blunders is when Blockbuster decided not to purchase Netflix. However, there may be another one that takes the cake. Back in 1876, the president of the Western Union Telegraph Company was presented with a golden opportunity when Alexander Graham Bell approached him with the opportunity to purchase the patent for the telephone for $100,000, or roughly $2.8 million in today's money. A notion that he felt was quite laughable, saying the phone was no more than a toy. So Bell started his own company, and a few years later, the president of Western Union told some colleagues that if he could get the patents today for $25 million, he'd consider it a bargain. A sum that would be worth nearly $800 million today. A pretty costly blunder in the long run, but at least, unlike Blockbuster, Western Union is still around. To make a long story short and gloss over a lot of details, Bell's company is also still around. You may know them as AT&T. This whole situation is especially laughable in hindsight considering how integral phones have become to society in general. Though your modern cell phone is a far cry away from Bell's original invention, it all started there. On October 9th, 1903, an article was published in the New York Times predicting it would take 1 to 10 million years for a working flying machine to develop. This was largely a response to the work of Samuel Langley, who 2 days prior had attempted a launch of his heavier-than-air flying machine, which failed. A few weeks later, scientist Simon Newcomb penned an article with one quote saying, "May not our mechanicians be ultimately forced to admit that aerial flight is one of the great class problems with which men can never cope and give up all attempts to grapple with it?" The article essentially posits that in order to achieve flight, new materials would need to be discovered. He was also very critical of Langley's work. Based on these dates, some of you already know where this is going. In December 1903, the Wright brothers achieved flight. Predictions decades and centuries before something happens are always quite funny to look at, since the world changes so much in between events. What makes this one so wild is that only 69 days after the New York Times article was published, flight was achieved. The Times predicted 1 to 10 million years. The Wright brothers did it in 2 months. We could make 1,000,001 videos all about failed predictions. And one of the most reoccurring predictions would be that this new thing is just gonna die out because it's just a fad. So to wrap up our last section here, we thought it might be fun to speedrun a few things that were just fads. According to Charlie Chaplin of all people, movies were just fads in the early 20th century, saying that audiences really wanted actors on stage. He was also against talkies, saying that movies needed needed sound as much as Beethoven needed lyrics. I wonder how he felt at the time of his death, being worth over $400 million. It's hard to imagine the world today without the internet. It has become so entwined with almost every part of our lives, but that wasn't always the case. On December 5th, 2000, the Daily Mail predicted that the internet may just be a fad and millions of people were giving up on it. Not to mention, 5 years previously, when Newsweek published an article decrying the actual usefulness of the internet. The gaming industry is $100 billion industry. It brings in more money than film and music combined. This, however, was not the case in the 70s, when Michael Moon of Milton Bradley declared that people get bored with video games after a month. He stated that the toy industry has a habit of overreacting to trends, and that gaming was just the latest trend. Perhaps there is no way to predict the future. One thing seems clear, however. People should stop trying to figure it out. The truth of the matter is, trends come and go, while some things are just here to stay. The other consistent theme of these predictions is people mistaking their own opinion with absolute fact. Now we look back at all these would-be prophets, and they all seem to have a little egg on their faces. Who knows what bold predictions won't come true next? If you're curious about all the predictions we talked about in this video and want to learn more, then we suggest with the articles we used in the making of this video, all of which are linked below. One prediction you can be sure of is we will continue serving up delicious knowledge burgers, so you should subscribe so you don't miss the next tasty bit of knowledge.